My name's Wendy Buckley and I'm the chair of the Sustainable Business Network in North Hampshire. This is a recording from our Biodiversity Revisited session. Why revisited? Well, we first looked at this during the lockdown, and since then I think we've all realised the importance of encouraging nature in our places of work and with our employees. This session looks with fresh eyes at that in the new world that we now inhabit.
Good morning and welcome to the Sustainable Business Network. My name is Wendy Buckley and I'm the chair of the Sustainable Business Network in North Hampshire, and also I'm client director over here at Carbon Footprint. A very warm welcome to today's session. Hopefully on the screen there you can see the agenda for this morning. It is a very packed programme that we have. Just before I run through what's in there, you'll notice there is a QR code on screen. That is for a little poll just to see what we're all doing on biodiversity right now. So if you'd like to please get your phones out, scan that in. Also, my colleague Miles is just going to pop on there in the chat function the manual link if you can't access that on your phone. So if you just go to the chat bubble there on the Teams panel, you'll be able to pick up that link there. So I'll just give you a couple of moments to have a go at that. We are recording today. I do need to let you know that first of all, but also that means you don't need to take copious notes here. That's all going to be across on YouTube, hopefully a little later today. So let's just run through the agenda here. We'll start off with the usual legal and market updates that I'll do, and then delighted to have Carmen Green from the Hampshire and Isle of Wight Wildlife Trust, who will tell us all about their programme and how it relates into biodiversity and your business. Then we have Leah Matthias Collins from Vitacress, who will give a case study of exactly what Vitacress is doing, and I think there'll be something for us all to take away from that. Thank you to all of you that have also submitted some questions ahead of this session. We will be tackling those in the panel discussion at the end there. I think there may be room for one or two more questions there. So we'll just see how that goes as we go along. And yes, that looks like an interesting end to the session today. Let's then move on and forward. To the legislation and market trends. This isn't the same QR code, but just to raise here, this is now the feedback form for today. Obviously, it'd be a bit early to fill that in, but just to say it really would be much appreciated if in the course of today you can fill that in. What we're looking for is the types of subjects that you'd like to see us tackle in future sessions, and things like whether you'd like to give a talk in these sessions. Please do let us know. It really would be much appreciated. Let's have a look at what's been happening since last time we met. Just pictorially, lots of things have been going on. We've had a couple of prime ministers over that time. Here's Rishi Sunak, who it turns out is going to COP27. He wasn't last week, he now is. So I think we're all pleased that that's happening. Also breaking this morning is some news that supposedly King Charles is not going to COP27 was actually vetoed by Liz Truss, and that, in fact, insiders saying he would have gone. So there we are, make of that what you will. Other things that have happened, there's a new president in Brazil, and hopefully Lula will be more appreciative on protective of the rainforest than we've seen recently. We obviously have huge profits being made in the energy industries, and I don't think I need to say anything more about that there and how controversial that is with the cost of living crisis. We've got new records for renewables generations in the UK, so we have some silver linings from what's going on there. Other things going on, the continued invasion of Ukraine by Russia, and an attempted, would it be freezing of Europe this winter, causing all the tensions there that we're all aware of, and pushing the need for us to really be more self-sufficient and to invest in more renewables. Perhaps a bit closer to home are the big changes in the Energy Savings Opportunity Scheme, ESOS. You can see in the middle there, a little video there. We're going to run through the headlines of that because that's probably something that's closer to home that we need to pay attention to quite closely. So let's move on to that in just a moment. Last week we had the UNEP's report on climate change, and really there the headline that we're nowhere near where we need to be to preserve the rise in temperature to be less than 1.5 Celsius looks like it could be as bad as 2.8. So there's clearly a lot of work to be done. There has been a lot of criticism of the lack of action since the COP26 in Glasgow. So there are high expectations of things moving forward at COP27 next week. Let's have a look at ESOS phase 3. Lots of words here on screen, which you'll be able to read off, obviously, in your own time and have a look at the video in due course. Some significant changes in this. If you were in phases 1 and 2, you'll be used to what they call a 10% de minimis, meaning that the audits only needed to apply to those contributions that were making up 90% of your energy use. The EA has decided that this isn't enough and has actually reduced that down now to 5% de minimis. Why? Well, really, what we think is that for a lot of businesses, particularly within the service sector, this avoided any consideration of transport energy use, and they wanted to see more extensive coverage of that. So I think that's why the de minimis has been reduced. It also lines up better with other international reporting mechanisms too. Actually, the thing that I should say hasn't changed within all this is it still applies only to large entities, which in broad terms means if you have 250 employees or more. There are a couple of equivalents there with the balance sheet and turnover, but basically if you recognise yourself as a large entity, then you're going to be in. Within the consultation, there was actually some provision for this to be extended down to medium-sized enterprises, but that's not happened. So maybe that's a bit of a relief for smaller companies at the moment. Other things in there are going to be targets now. So this has always been a criticism of ESOS is that, yes, you reported your energy use, but you didn't actually have to do anything about it. What ESOS phase 3 seems to do now is want you to also report some metrics. Those might be based on energy use per person in the business, per £1 million turnover, etc. What they do want you then to do is to make some commitments to reduce energy use. So that's actually tackling the criticism of ESOS from the previous phases. You'll actually be measured on your performance in ESOS phase 4, but that will be another 4 years on from the deadline. And this one, the deadline for submission for phase 3 being December 2023. That might seem a little way away, but given what I've said about the reduction in that de minimis means you're going to have to do more energy audits. It's going to be more work to do. So, many of the folks we're working with at Carbon Footprint have got started on this, and I would encourage you to do likewise. Other bits of legislation that relate to this, just a quick shout out here for the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures, or TCFD. Bit of a mouthful. This is really extended non-financial reporting for slightly bigger organisations, and this came in April this year. Now, I just wanted to simplify this down to what it really is, because I've seen quite a bit of noise about this and lots of quite long reports coming out. But when you actually distill this down, this is all based on risk analysis on the effects of climate change and obviously opportunities brought about by that. So really, it's centered around a big risk workshop and risk matrix. That's really what I wanted to say about it. It is much easier than it actually looks. I'll let you study that in a little bit more detail here, but just to say that is for the slightly larger businesses. So it's not 250 plus employees, it's 500 plus, and you can see the criteria there. We always like to tackle environmental fines and convictions, and for once I'm actually not talking about water companies, which is a bit of a relief really. A couple of key names actually brand-wise on here. Dairycrest, obviously a very well respected brand, I'm sure will be horrified by receiving what was the biggest fine that the EA has given out in the southwest. Yeah, huge fine for them for environmental transgressions, resulting in damage to aquatic wildlife. I'm sure they would prefer not to be there. They did admit to 21 of 27 charges that were pressed on them there, and we can all see on screen how much that cost them. I think, in terms of reputation, that would be probably more than that as well. The EA has been saying that they're going to get strong on convictions, and this even includes custodial sentences. And there's an example there on screen of that actually happening to a Norfolk man with a criminal behaviour order also issued for illegal waste operation. So this Norfolk man was actually given 6 months in jail because of that. So you can see that the EA is getting really tough, not just monetary fines. So it's something you just can't fund your way out of. It can land you in a lot of trouble and, in fact, in jail. Another very well respected brand, Diageo, found itself in trouble and had to foot the bill of £1.2 million here from the Scottish Environment Protection Agency for breaches in environmental legislation. So again, that's one with a very big fine for a company that I'm sure would prefer its name to not be associated with that. So hopefully both of those companies we're going to see some very positive environmental actions going forward, which I'm sure we will. Now, here's some homework for you to do. All the links are down here to follow up the rest of these stories. This has been a whistle-stop tour through, so please do follow up with those. If you've got a specific question, I've just popped my email there at the end. And with that, we will move on to the main agenda. I think we're just about on time, so if it's fine with you to keep us moving along here, I think we'll move on to our first key speaker of the day, and I'm delighted to have Carmen Green from the Hampshire and Isle of Wight Wildlife Trust to speak to us about their biodiversity programme. Carmen, over to you, please.
Morning. Thank you very much, Wendy. And yeah, thank you for having me here today. I'm just going to share my screen with you right now. Hopefully it all works okay. Cool. Is that all showing up nicely? You can see my screen.
We see it. It's great.
Perfect. Thank you. Right, so yeah, as Wendy said, my name's Carmen. I'm the Ecology and Evidence Manager at the Hampshire Wildlife Trust. Yeah, and thank you for coming to listen to me today talk about biodiversity and your business. To start off with an overview of what biodiversity is, why we need it, and ways in which you can improve biodiversity at your business. So just a little bit of background on myself and Hampshire Wildlife Trust. Hopefully most of you have heard of us already. But we are the leading nature conservation charity across Hampshire and the Isle of Wight. We undertake all sorts of work across the two counties, including mostly habitat management and practical conservation tasks on a number of our reserves. So we have about 56 nature reserves in total across the two counties. So we do all the habitat management works there, as well as survey and monitoring work. And we also work with our members, members of the public, to undertake education and engagement tasks as well. So we have a lot of staff members, a lot of members of the trust, and a lot of volunteers. I myself work within the consultancy branch of the Hampshire Wildlife Trust called Arcadian Ecology and Consulting, and we are responsible for all the survey and monitoring work that goes on, and looking to expand this now into nature-based solutions to address issues with biodiversity. So a bit more detail on the ecology side of the Wildlife Trust. So we work with all sorts of species, ranging from plants to invertebrates to mammals, birds, and reptiles, for example, including protected species such as bats, breeding birds, and great crested newts, dormice. We work with landowners to advise and provide recommendations on how to manage and enhance their land for wildlife. So quite often these days we're asked to come onto sites, have a wander around, discuss with the clients what sort of things they're after, what their intentions are to improve habitats for wildlife, and then we'll give a sort of baseline data set on what's there currently in terms of habitats and species, what could be there if a bit more habitat improvement works are undertaken. So yeah, our client base is quite broad, so we work with private landowners as well as businesses in the local area, local councils, and yeah, a number of our clients are also corporate members of the trust as well, and that includes Vitacress, and yeah, we've worked with Leah for a number of years now from Vitacress, which is really good. So yeah, our corporate members, it's quite a good setup. So they donate money to the trust, and in return we provide a lot of help and support to them, reduce rates for ecological surveys, and yeah, have their name on our website as well to show that they are investing in nature. So why are we doing this? Why do we care about biodiversity? As I'm sure a lot of you already are aware of, we hear about it more and more all the time. We are in the middle of a climate and nature emergency right now, and it's something that we really need to address quite soon, before it sort of spirals out of control. So yeah, over the years, even just in our lifetime, we've noticed the impacts of climate change. It's been so severe, and it's resulted in a lot of species in the UK and globally becoming threatened, unfortunately. And yeah, now's the time to step up and do our bit to address these drastic changes and hopefully reverse them in the long term. So the Wildlife Trust response has been this new strategy. Well, I say new, it came out in 2020. So we're 3 years into it now, and this is the Wilder 2030 strategy. So what we want to do is we want to get more people involved, taking action for nature. We want to put nature in recovery. So the idea, we want at least 30% of all land and sea to be protected and managed in a positive way for nature. And we want people to step up and take part and inspire and empower others to do the same. And ideally using nature as a solution. So we don't want to see it as a hindrance, a burden. We want to work alongside nature, because we understand that we do need nature to survive, and nature needs us. So we want to provide a nice win-win scenario where both we can thrive alongside nature. So yeah, hopefully you're aware that there are a lot of benefits to having biodiversity within our lives, and we need it to survive. So there are a lot of ecosystem benefits to having a good, healthy environment, such as reducing the risk of flooding. So you want a nice sort of green landscape with lots of trees and plants, rather than lots of hard surfaces, tarmac, where rainwater falls, there's just nowhere for it to go. So it just accumulates and floods rather than drain away slowly into the landscape. Also helps prevent things like coastal erosion, and maintains healthy soils, which is essential for us for growing our crops, for us to grow food, as well as providing ecosystem services such as important pollinators that we need to pollinate our crops as well. And having a healthy environment will provide clean water for us to drink, clean air for us to breathe. And yeah, there's been a lot of studies recently on how biodiversity and nature has significant impacts on our health and well-being. So many studies have come out to show that just a little bit of nature is enough, and it's essential to improve our well-being. And I think a lot of us have probably seen the effects of this during lockdown and the pandemic, and just reaching out to nature more and more as a way to relax, as a therapy, and a way to sort of escape the busy daily lives that we all lead now. So biodiversity net gain I'll come on to now. So this is a term that's used more and more at the moment, and it can be defined as an approach that aims to leave the natural environment in a measurably better state than what it was beforehand. And it's a way of ensuring that any proposals, any developments that happen, that they go above and beyond what they used to do, to ensure that nature isn't impacted negatively, and it turns out better than what it was beforehand. And there's quite a handy guide online called the Biodiversity Net Gain Good Practice Principles, which is quite useful to outlines this in a lot of detail, and with suggestions on what you can do to increase net gain. So this diagram here is just a very basic example of what net gain is and how it can be done. So start from the top, it's the worst scenario, and going down, it gets better. So you can see in the top row there, you've got a habitat on the left-hand side. The developers come in, bulldoze the whole lot, and then build a block of flats there instead. The habitat's lost completely. There is no planting afterwards. It's just hard standing and building. And this is a net loss in the habitat because the habitat that was there previously is gone completely now and not replaced. The next row down is slightly better, so same processes happen. However, at the end, as well as building the block of flats, they also plant some trees, put down some grassland, and replace like for like what was there previously. Overall, this results in no net loss, but there's also no net gain. The habitats are exactly the same as what they were beforehand. As you look down at the bottom row, this is better still, because as well as replacing the habitats that were lost previously to development, they're also providing net gain by increasing the amount of habitats that are currently there. So as you can see on top of the building, there's a green roof, there's some green walls, the trees and grassland are replaced, but there's also additional trees and there's a pond created as well. So this is just a very basic example of what net gain should look like. So you're replacing the habitats lost, but also providing more habitats than what there were previously. So the biodiversity metric calculation tool is a way of looking at the biodiversity or ecological value of a site, and it provides values and figures to show whether it would result in a net gain or a net loss in habitats. So what you do is you look at the existing habitats and the habitats that there will be following any development proposals, and put all the habitats in, as well as the size and areas of the habitat, the conditions of the habitat, and the metric tool will generate values for biodiversity units and give a percentage of what the net gain should look like if you follow all the measures that you put into it. So biodiversity net gain is included in the New Environment Act, and therefore it's going to be compulsory as part of any planning permission, planning applications going forwards. Generally, you're looking to achieve at least 10% biodiversity net gain in all proposals. It can vary across the country, but most planning authorities adopt the 10% biodiversity net gain as a minimum requirement. And yeah, the metric tool, it's split into 3 sections. So you, in the green line, it's habitat parcels, the brown line is hedgerows, and the blue at the bottom is rivers. And you need to achieve at least 10% in each of these separate aspects of the metric tool. So the biodiversity metric is generally used by ecologists because it requires a certain level of technical knowledge and skills to assess habitat types, habitat conditions that gets inputted into the metric. But it will also be used by developers, landowners, and planning authorities as well, who will review this metric tool. So yeah, as I mentioned, when you input into the calculation tool, you need to know what habitats are present on site and what will be there afterwards. You need to put in the areas and sizes of all the habitats, what condition it's in, whether it's in good condition currently or if it's in actually quite a bad condition and might need to be enhanced and improved later on. It's also important to look at whether it's in a local nature conservation area, so whether it's a designated site, whether it's in ecological networks, things like that. Another important aspect of looking at biodiversity net gain and enhancements is the mitigation hierarchy, which I've just put down the bottom there. So in the first instance, whenever you're doing any sort of development or have any proposals in place, what you want to do is avoid affecting biodiversity in the very first instance. That is the best scenario for wildlife. If that's not possible and you have to go ahead anyway, the next best thing to do is to mitigate for any impacts, just by reducing the impacts on the environment to hopefully not result in a net loss. So this could be things like putting up fencing around root protection zones to protect trees, preventing any spillages into rivers and watercourses. Finally, if you can't do either of those things and you have to go ahead and the habitat has to be lost, then you must compensate for the loss of that habitat. Otherwise, it will result in a significant ecological impact and a net loss overall. So this is what the biodiversity metric calculation tool looks like. I won't overwhelm you and bore you with the details of it all. It's quite complicated. It's quite overwhelming to look at when you first see it, but it just shows you what sort of things are inputted into it. So starting from the left, you start off with the habitat types, and then working across, you put in the areas, the conditions of the habitat, and then whether it's in a local plan or not. And then the final column on the right-hand side, it automatically populates a total habitat unit for each of the habitat lines that you put into it. It's quite useful as well in the second to last column. It suggests sorts of actions that you can do to address any habitat loss. Some habitats are quite nice and easy to compensate for, others can be quite tricky, and sometimes it's impossible to completely compensate for a loss of that habitat if it's really high quality or really unique in that landscape. So looking at biodiversity net gain, there are a number of options, lots of things that you can do to increase biodiversity on your land. So habitat enhancements are by far the best and easiest way to improve things for wildlife, and it does score more highly in the biodiversity metric tool than habitat creation. And this is simply because you're working with something that's already there, and just making it better rather than starting from scratch completely and creating something brand new. So habitat enhancements are generally a lot easier to do, less time consuming, and more likely to be successful than creating something from scratch. And this could be simple things from just changing a mowing regime on a grassland, just mowing, for example, once or maybe twice a year rather than intensively mowing it on a regular basis. And this just allows wildflowers to bloom all through the summer, which provides food and foraging resources for pollinators. And it could be more cost effective as well, rather than paying a contractor to mow the grassland every month throughout the summer, just doing it once or twice a year. So it's a wildlife benefit and also a cost saving benefit as well can be. Things like coppice woodlands and hedgerows, not manage them as intensively as you may be doing already. So just doing it every few years rather than playing the hedge every year. That just creates a better environment for wildlife, a denser hedgerow that offers more opportunities for nesting birds and also provides lots of flowers and seeds and nuts for the wildlife to feed on as well. Ponds and wetland restoration is also a great thing to do. There's probably a lot of ponds out there that aren't in the best of conditions and aren't supporting as much wildlife as they should be. So that's another great way of providing biodiversity net gain, is by just restoring what you've got already. Conversely, you can create habitats as well. If the habitats you already have are probably already in a good condition, you could create new ones, such as creating a pond. I think something Chris Packham said a while ago is creating a pond is one of the best things that you can do for wildlife, and it just offers a nice diversity of habitats. So wildflower meadows as well, that's great. It can be quite easy to do. And you can see the benefits of it quite soon after doing so. And shrub and tree planting as well is also a great thing to provide additional resources for wildlife. And the next slide is, so this is one of the biodiversity net gain projects we've been involved with recently. So I've got two maps here. The one on the left-hand side shows what the habitats are like currently on the site, and then the right-hand side shows what the proposed habitats will look like once they've finished all the works there. So it's currently just grassland at the moment. There's a river on the eastern side, you can see it sort of wiggling down, and then a block of woodland in the middle. So what the plans are is to create a series of wetland habitats, ponds and scrapes, as well as a bit of planting to just create a more diverse habitat structure there for wildlife. And putting all this into the metric, using that calculation tool, it's resulted in a 17.12% net gain for biodiversity. It doesn't look like it's changing that much, But the main things that are contributing to this net gain is largely from, you can't see it in the image, but the grassland management regime will be changing, so it'll be mown less frequently and allow wildflowers to bloom, and this has the biggest impact on net gain. But also you're creating new habitats as well, like the wetlands and the pools, and that brown band that towards the bottom, that's all mixed shrub planting as well. So yeah, a more diverse range of habitats and structures for wildlife to use. And when we recommend tree and shrub planting, we always recommend native species that are in keeping with what's already there. So we don't want to create something brand new and different. We want something that's appropriate for the habitats that are already there and the wider landscape. So what can businesses do to help nature? There's many things that can be done. It doesn't matter how big or small your business is, how much land you own. There's always things that can be done for nature. So I've just put a series of like smaller little bits and pieces that you can do if you're limited on space and on budget. So things like putting up a few different bird boxes, bat boxes. That's providing opportunities for wildlife to nest and roost there. Insect hotels are also a great thing to do. Invertebrates are really struggling at the moment and decline so rapidly, so just providing those resources for them would be great. If there's any new developments going on, any new buildings, extensions, there are always ways to incorporate habitat into these. So you can see towards the bottom there in the bricks, there's just a little gap, and that's for bats to use. They can go up in there and roost, but it's not really that noticeable on the building itself. So you can put in bat bricks like that. You can put in bee bricks, that's just little holes that bees can go in to use. Or leave gaps in, like very small gaps into roof spaces that bats can go into and use to roost in. Things like hedgehog highways as well, very small but effective way of helping hedgehogs, just leaving a little hole at the bottom of a fence really, just that enables them to continue going around the landscape rather than having a fragmented landscape where there are barriers that they can't get through. Similar to insect hotels, log piles and compost heaps are great for a whole range of species, including invertebrates, but also reptiles, amphibians, small mammals. And also just changes to things like lighting regimes as well could have a significant impact and help wildlife, especially nocturnal species like bats, some nocturnal birds, moths. Just reducing the light spillage can have a massive impact because it's currently quite a fragmented and well-lit landscape for these species, and it does provide barriers and stops, for example, bats moving around as well as they'd like to. So just, yeah, controlling the light spillage, maybe putting lighting on timers, just so that the whole area isn't lit up fully all the time. If you've got a larger area to work with, there may be other things that you can do. So sort of things I mentioned earlier in terms of habitat creation. So building a pond, creating a wildflower meadow, planting trees and shrubs. Or even if you are limited on space, you could probably create a green wall on the building, green roofs, or just, yeah, using climbing plants, trellises, all sorts. Anywhere there is space, there will be opportunities to plant, and we, yeah, always recommend native species where possible, ones that are going to flower all year round. You might want a nice variety of species that would do that, things that will attract invertebrates, and in so doing will attract other species like birds and bats and mammals. Yeah, finally, another thing you can do is just to engage with nature, engage with your colleagues, your friends, your family, and just talk about nature and pass on the message. So you can take part in a lot of different schemes. Some are run by the Wildlife Trust, but there's also other conservation charities as well that get involved. So things like No Mow May, 30 Days Wild. You can get involved with the wilder approach. So yeah, Hampshire Wildlife Trust do have a wilder team as part of the strategy I mentioned earlier, and yeah, you can get involved with that. There's lots of communities out there that are part of this wilder approach, and it's quite nice to be part of a community that support and help each other, provide tips and tricks on how to improve biodiversity on their lands. It might also be worth talking with the maintenance team that you have at your business to make them aware of biodiversity, any legislation involved, and just everyone can do their bit to help nature and help biodiversity. Okay, so yeah, that was a very brief overview of biodiversity and a selection of things that you can do to help biodiversity. Just let me know if you have any questions, and my details are there. Thank you very much for listening.
Well, thank you, Carmen, for that fascinating presentation there. We do have the chat function open right now. So if you look for the speech bubble, I think it's the fourth icon across, if you wanted to put a question across now to Carmen. I actually have one, somebody's emailed me a question. I'm going to fire away with that one, which is an anonymous one, but that's fine, which I'll try and articulate correctly here. Really, it's, have there been any studies of the impact of biodiversity sort of investment in the workplace on productivity of the teams? Because we know it's good for us and our mental welfare and all those things. Just wondering, yeah, I guess this is just wondering whether there have been any studies or any anecdotes that you have of the benefits that someone's sort of measured. I think that's what our question is asking there.
Okay, so I can't think of any studies off the top of my head, but I know that there are a lot of studies done around this, and there's lots going on at the moment, especially since COVID and lockdown, just how nature is just benefiting everyone's well-being. I can't think of a particular study or put a figure to it. I think there's definitely a lot of work going on now, so hopefully work will be published soon on that, but there's definitely a lot of anecdotal evidence anyway.
It'd be nice to see some quantitative stats, wouldn't it, on that? That would
it would be
see.
Really interesting, because I'm sure there will be, because nature certainly has a benefit, but it would be good to actually see what this is and have it measured.
Great. Okay, we've got a question coming in here from Neil, who said, can you provide some advice where a business might purchase bird and bat boxes for enhancement of our building biodiversity in the UK? Delighted to say we have become 2 honeybee hives on site, a great enhancement. That's
Brilliant.
there from Neil. So yes, advice on where to purchase. Maybe we can do that quickly, or maybe we can add a little footnote onto this in the video of where you might go for suppliers there.
So I can send a few links in the chat in a second, but main ones we recommend would probably be NHBS, which is Natural History Book Society. They have a lot of different types of bird and bat boxes there. Also Wildcare have some as well. We usually recommend the woodcrete type ones rather than just the wooden type ones. So woodcrete is a little bit more expensive, but it's a lot more longer lasting rather than wood that tends to rot away after a few years. But I can send a few links in the chat where you can purchase these from.
Okay. I think another one across to me, I've got another person asking what support that you can provide to particularly home workers in maybe putting up bird boxes and other measures for folks doing blended working and working from home to benefit from that biodiversity in the home workspace, if that makes sense, in our new normal.
Definitely. There's definitely so many things that can be done that doesn't have to be too costly or too big a investment. So putting up bird boxes and bat boxes on your house, or if you've got a garden, put it up on a tree outside. Put out bird food. You can get the little window feeders for birds, and making sure to provide water for birds as well would be great. Insect hotels are brilliant, and it's amazing how quickly they get used by insects. So there are lots of things that can be done, and just making sure that you're sort of putting them in the right places for wildlife to use. If you put it out for a few years, find it's not being taken up just yet, it might be worth just moving to a slightly different location, and hopefully it gets used.
Great. We'll take a little break for a second. Thank you again, Carmen, for that excellent presentation and for helping us out with the questions there. And we'll have a look at what our survey said. So hopefully up on our screen, you can see our survey says the results from that. So just having a look at that now. This is quite positive, actually, isn't it? Really good to see that blue slice in there of people that are doing lots of things right now. Sorry that these lines here are slightly truncated in what they say, but here we go. Quite a nice set of folks actually doing quite a lot now. And the biggest slice here, almost 50% of the pie, in fact. We're having a go. We've done some things, but we know we need to do more, and hopefully that's why you're here today. I think perhaps most notable on here is down here, that we haven't done things yet, and the crucial bit that's maybe missing from that is, and we need to convince management of its value to do it. So I think that might be something that comes up in the panel discussion a little bit later. As I say, the survey is still open, so if you want to have a go at this, we can perhaps get a little bit of a fuller picture later. That's still there, so maybe Miles will just pop the link in the chat if you still need to submit your answer there. It'd be good to get the full picture from everyone on the session today about what you're doing. Great. Okay, we will then move forwards in the interest of time. Let us do that. I'm now delighted to introduce Leah Matthias Collins from Vitacress to talk about the work that you're doing. Leah, if you'd like to grab the screen from me, that would be perfect.
Okay, can everybody see that?
That's all there, thank you.
Lovely. Okay, thanks for having me today. My name's Leah Matthias Collins. I'm the Group Environment Manager for Vitacress. We are a large business, but what I'm going to talk about is our environment programme for biodiversity. And basically, any aspect of this can be scaled down or up, depending on what size of your business. So it leads on nicely from Carmen's talk. I'm going to talk about our scheme called Vitacress Farm Excellence, and this is actually certified by LeafMark for us. And it all fits in part of our whole Second Nature programme, which is our environmental strategy for the whole business, which spans across the UK and parts of Northern Europe. And Second Nature has an ambition for us as a company to become net zero by 2040. And biodiversity is part of that programme. So we have several areas within that programme, and one of them here, which hopefully you can see here, is more biodiversity. So let me move on. So where does Vitacress Farm Excellence fit in to our Second Nature programme? So biodiversity is a priority under our Second Nature programme. However, all elements of the environment affect biodiversity in our business operations. We're predominantly a farming-based business. We grow salads and herbs for the culinary market in the major retailers. So we have a major farming operation across the UK and parts of Europe. We take in that product. It comes into our factory in the UK in St Marylebone near Andover, where it's washed, packaged and distributed to the major supermarkets. So along that whole process, we have responsibilities for nature and the environment. And I'm not going to read through all these, but these are just to give you an example of a few areas. So we farm on soil, obviously. If we don't have good soil, with good structure, with earthworms and microbiology, which is all important for biodiversity, obviously, we can't actually grow our crops. We're slightly unique. We don't need pollinators to grow our crops, but our neighbours do. So we try to help our neighbours as well with growing their crops. Okay. So how do we do it? How do we go about this? So what's the business case for biodiversity? Well, Vitacress employs nearly 2,000 people across its operations. So we're very big, and we have a lot of directors and managing directors to convince that biodiversity is important for the business. So the first bit is, well, we've got to do the right thing. That's the first part of the business case, for ourselves, for the future of our business, and also for our customers, which are like I say, the major supermarkets, and also for consumers who expect it from us as well. But not just for those people, it's for the people that work for the company, people have their families, and all our future generations. So we're looking after our own people as well as our customers. So our business, as I said, is a farming business. We can't farm without biodiversity. We can't farm without a quality environment. So we need to make sure that everything we get from the environment to farm and the resources we use for our manufacturing part of the process are protected and there for the future. So we see this as a way of making us a more resilient company. So therefore we can carry on with what we're doing. We'll become more competitive because we'll overtake others because we're doing much more for the environment and supporting it. And then also our business is prepared for those changes. Carmen mentioned things like flood protection. You know, we need to manage our land in a better way and our hard surfaces in a better way to ensure that our business can keep moving and keep moving forward. We're already seeing issues with climate change effects. This year is an example. We've had no water. We've had severe depletion of water resources on our farms, but also in our washing process for salads. So we need to make sure we're managing the land properly around the business to ensure that that resource is always available to us. The other thing is that the way the grant system is going at the moment for land managers through the new ELMS system, if we don't do more for the environment, we will not be eligible for any of the new grants that are coming through. And the new grant system is looking at working individually and with others in the wider landscape. And Vitacress Farm Excellence is about that wider programme in the landscape. So why is nature good for our business? So I've talked about a few. Healthy soils, they produce better quality crops. And then we can also reduce our costs through less inputs into those soils. So if you have a good, healthy soil with good structure, good biology in that soil, we don't need to apply the quantity of fertilizers we have to apply now. The substrates that we grow our pot herbs in, at the moment, they're a peat-based substrate. That's not good for biodiversity. So we need to find substrates which we can grow our herbs in, which are good for nature and good for the business, and also do our bit to protect those peatlands. Water, incredibly important, and this all links in with soils and biodiversity. We absolutely need water to irrigate our crops and also to wash our products. The healthier your soil is, the better the biodiversity on your land, and the healthier your soil is, the more water is retained within that soil, and therefore we reduce our costs of irrigation and reduce our water use as well. Carmen mentioned nature-based solutions. We look towards nature-based solutions in quite a heavy way through natural treatment of our water. So not only do we take our water from the environment, we also put it back in the environment. And it's really important that that water is clean and better than when it came out. And one of the best ways to treat water is through natural treatment. So we look at wetlands, using our river systems or developing new streams and river systems which can manage water quality for us. And in turn, then you're providing new habitats and really great biodiversity in the aquatic environment. Talked about natural flood management, but a really important one for a business like ours is natural pest management. We are, as farmers, up against a reduction in agrochemicals. Now, agrochemicals are not good, and we do need to remove them from the operations, but they're an essential part of growing food to ensure that you have food and that you have good quality food. But through biodiversity and planting up areas around our farms and our sites, we can actually introduce beneficial species that will aid that pest management for us. So it's a very complicated story with pest management, because essentially, if you went to a supermarket and bought a bag of salad and it was full of holes, you may be one of those people that will complain about that. Well, the more holes you see in a salad leaf is due to the fact that it's been attacked by pests. So therefore we use agrochemicals to reduce that damage. So natural pest management is a really important part of biodiversity management, because the more quality habitats you have, the better pest management you have. And carbon capture and storage, really important for our bottom line carbon assessments. Biodiversity and habitats and our farmland and soils all go towards increasing our carbon capture and storage and reducing our carbon footprint. And everything in turn leads to climate change resilience. So I just wanted to talk about the Vitacress Farm Excellence Partnership. Like I say, we are a large company, so this is quite a complicated partnership, but any smaller businesses wishing to do something like this could just talk to the Wildlife Trust and get advice and set up a much smaller programme. So we start with ourselves. We have a series of growing managers, or our farmers essentially, who are responsible for managing nature on the sites and on the farms. We also have estate teams who are responsible for the management of our car parks, our sort of more formal areas, if you like. Those teams are also then going to be looking at monitoring biodiversity and then assessing any impacts through any new operations or initiatives. And part of their job now, they have to assess their impacts on biodiversity. The LEAF, Linking Environment and Farming group, are providing us with assurance and credibility for the scheme. We're already LEAF Mark certified farmers. Every single one of our farms is LEAF Mark certified. And this essentially is a programme of a range of measures to ensure that you farm with a positive outcome for the environment. What we've done is extended that LEAF Mark reporting to include bespoke questions on our Vitacress Farm Excellence programme. And we're assessed every year by LEAF to show how we're doing, where our progress is, and where we need to do better. And this holds us to account, essentially. And that's really, really important in terms of reputation and authenticity. LEAF also can help us with their expertise in training. They can upskill our farmers, and they provide lots of services to help with advice and also contacts with other members of the farming community or people who are in their scheme. So our third partner is the Hampshire and Isle of Wight Wildlife Trust, along with the Arcadian ecological arm that Carmen's talked about. As a business, Vitacress have worked with Hampshire and Isle of Wight Wildlife Trust for probably 2 decades now, if not more. And we felt this was an important part of this scheme to show that we will work with an independent NGO who will essentially also hold us to account, but assess what we're doing, what status our sites are in, and what we can do better. We've actually gone through a really large program of ecological appraisals, and as a result of that, we have individually tailored biodiversity action plans for every single site in the UK at the moment. So that's 11 biodiversity action plans, and they have a 10-year life to them. It's big stuff. So the programme is essentially, we start with, and again, this is something that can be scaled up or down depending on the size of your business. We start with an ecological appraisal. For our sites, that's quite detailed because we have a lot and they're big. If you had a smaller business, that could be a much smaller appraisal of what you've got around you. That appraisal is carried out by Arcadian Ecology, who then produce a report with, what's the current status of your site and what recommendations are there to actually enhance biodiversity. It does also point out the good stuff as well. This is brilliant, carry on with it, and these are some extra things you can do. But this is a collaborative process, and it's about ensuring our people are involved and engaged right from the beginning. So once that report is produced, we sit down with our site managers or farm managers with Arcadian and go through that report line by line sometimes, depending on what's in it, and agree on what can be done and what can't be done. Because the ecological appraisal is taken purely from an ecology point of view, and then our farmers come in and bring in the operational point of view. So we come to, I suppose it's a compromise of what can happen and what can't happen. And then Arcadian go away and produce a 10-year biodiversity action plan, which has short-term actions, medium-term actions, and long-term actions. And then we have help and information and advice on what we can use as indicator habitats and species to measure our progress. Then we get onto the really tricky bit. We get onto A, you have to enhance habitats. That costs some money. And then B, you have to monitor those habitats and decide how you're going to monitor that and what you're going to look at. This is a really tough part, which I'm going to come on to in a second. And then we have an evaluation every year. We meet to evaluate the programme, and then there'll be a new ecological appraisal every 3 years to then build on that original baseline. So the challenges, these are but a few. It is, I think, a business our size, it's quite difficult, and the type of business we have, it can be quite difficult. So I've just sort of basically listed 3 areas. The first area for us is our growing operation. So one challenge we have is that growing fresh produce as we do, so it's ready to eat, has a very, very fast turnaround. It's very difficult for us to practice regenerative farming on the type of farming we have. And so we have to find ingenious ways of keeping species and habitats on our site while we've got a very heavily operated area. The next challenge is pests and what we call foreign body control. So foreign bodies are anything that may drop into your field. So what you don't want to find in your bag of salad is a mouse or a frog or anything like that. So we have to manage wildlife in a way where it doesn't come into the crop, which is quite tricky when you're creating and enhancing habitats around your fields. So tough one there. And we are also an allergen-free site, so we are not allowed to have nuts on our site. So already you've taken out various species of trees that we can actually plant on our sites. So some of the solutions we've come up with are, in terms of our land, we rotate our farming and we provide cover crops, which are great for pollinators. And this is on a rotational basis. So we have some land lying fallow with cover crops on it, mainly clover-based crops. So they're great for bees. And we rest our soils in between, and we'll plant different types of crops to ensure that our soils are rested and that other benefits come to our soils from that. The habitat species mix and timing is a really great solution. So our farmers have forecasts for pests, which is something quite new to me. So this year, for example, one of our farm managers, she has a forecast for aphids and how big that problem is going to be and at what time of year. So she plans a timing of when she plants her habitats and her conservation areas, wildflower areas. And these are then also planned in terms of what type of seed is used, what species. And actually what we're finding, we were talking about documenting the effects of biodiversity, is that we are seeing a much reduced aphid loading on our crops when we plant our annual wildflower areas at the right time. So they're blooming at the right time, because it brings in the beneficial species that then either eat the aphids or it attracts the aphids to the conservation areas. We talked about location of habitats. We have various areas that we locate habitats on our sites to avoid that pest and foreign body issue in our crops. And we talked about tree selection. So our remaining challenges are still pests and weeds. And the biggest part of this is customer standards. And that's what your product on the supermarket shelf looks like. And we're under very, very strict cosmetic standards that we have to conform to. Number of holes in the leaf, for example. And you'll have all seen this wonky veg initiative that's going forward. We need more of you to support sort of holy salad would be a way I would put it, because it's better for biodiversity at the end of the day. So the consumer has a lot of power when it comes to biodiversity and farming. Now we move on to cost. And some of the challenges there is that the actual scheme management for us is quite a high cost, and the survey costs are quite high when you use professionals, and monitoring costs can be quite high because, again, you need people who know what they're looking for when they're doing ecological surveys. So one of the solutions we've thought up is that we've actually incorporated farm excellence into our leaf mark programme, so we don't have extra auditing costs. We select which professional surveys we require. So we've had to abandon some surveys in favour of other surveys because the sheer cost of the services is just too much. And then we're training up people to carry out surveys as well and relying on volunteers. So we're still looking for robust and cost-effective monitoring of our sites. So that's an ongoing challenge, and I'm currently looking into digital remote sensing equipment for our sites, which will count our insects, count our birds, and provide us with an ongoing service. Then our other challenge, again, it's still cost, is the ecological survey. It's finding the right expertise, which we do have in the Wildlife Trust, making sure our data is good. So when we use volunteers, we have to have our data validated to make sure that actually what they're seeing is what they're seeing. And the time it takes to carry out these surveys is quite burdensome on our farmers, which is why we're relying on volunteers and other people. So remaining challenges, as I said, is reliable results, and then this monitoring of key species. I'm not really in favour of monitoring key species because unless you're doing it daily, you're not going to see them perhaps on the day you turn up. So the remaining challenges to address key species monitoring is maybe looking at habitat health through a range of species. So they're just some of our challenges. The other biggest challenge is culture, and that's changing the minds of people. So that's your business case. People like neat and tidy, I find, and sometimes we've got to change those hearts and minds. So the foundations of our success, effective partnerships. Like I say, we've been working with the Wildlife Trust for a long time, and we are now a corporate partner through this scheme. We're finding that relationship really beneficial. Communication and engagement with our employees is key to get them involved and wanting to get out there. We have several sites where people sit in offices and sometimes they've never been outside, which is a shame because we are pretty rural in places. Getting people interested in getting their support gives them ownership and pride in where they work. And also learning new things is always exciting for people. We need to get more on board with technology and data to understand how we can monitor better. And really important one is our strong and inspiring leadership. We have leadership and support for this scheme right from the very top, from the chief executive down. And then one thing we don't do so well is actually celebrating our successes. We need to shout louder about what we're doing and invite more people to come and see. So employee interest and support, just a few examples of what we do. So we've had training with Hampshire and Isle of Wight Wildlife Trust here, come to one of our sites. This is a half-hectare wildflower meadow that one of our farmers planted, mainly because he felt like doing it, which was fantastic, and he was inspired by the whole programme to do this. We're getting involved with easy ways of detecting bats. So our farmers live on the sites, so they can go out at night and plug this little device into their smartphone, and it will tell them what bats are there, and you can keep the recording so we can monitor bats. An extent of our involvement engagement showing with insect hotels. Our farmers actually built this one. They wanted to do it. We decided, they said, don't buy them, we're going to build it ourselves. And they produced this. It took several months because they had to do it in between their day-to-day job. But it's fantastic. And this will be a wildflower area next year. And hopefully we'll see some good results. Each year we want to run an environment week to involve our people across offices and farms. And then we're also producing what I'm calling environmental essential guides, which will help people understand why we have to work to benefit the environment, what it does for us, etc. Unfortunately, I'm giving you the waste example because that's the one that's completed. So very quickly, governance and compliance. I just wanted to show you this partnership and how it actually works in practice. So there's me, environment manager. I talk to the business director at Leaf and the fundraising development manager at the Hampshire and Isle of Wight Wildlife Trust. Our growers talk to the Arcadian Ecology, and our farm auditor talks to the leaf technical coordinator and our growers. So they work together on the audits. And then we all have a communications manager where we come together to share our stories. Very basic example of the partnership there. So very quickly measuring our success. We are measuring through a program called POMS, which is the National Pollinator Monitoring Scheme. Absolutely any business can get involved with this. It's a survey designed to take 10 minutes where you look at a flower and count bugs and beasties, essentially. And then you upload that to the POMS website. And you can download reports to see what's happening on your business, whether it's in just a little courtyard at the front where you might have a tub of flowers, or whether it's on a larger scale like a farm like ours. And it's a great way to record wildlife and learn about pollinators. We also use a national scheme called iRecord, which is where we upload all our species data of everything we see, and that is validated through a network of volunteers through iRecord. And again, we can download reports. And then we have various things. This is the bat monitoring on a smartphone. We talk about what we do on LinkedIn, and then our partners extend that to Twitter and other social media. Right, so that's the partnership and the main program. I just wanted to briefly run through our sites. And I think a few of you may be sitting and thinking, oh, we don't have anything like that. But I would like to show you some of our sites where actually you can apply a lot of this to your businesses. So we'll start with aquaculture, which is watercress farming. This is one of our sites. We have over 80 hectares of land across 8 watercress farms in Hampshire and Dorset. Every single one of them is situated on a chalk stream, so very sensitive habitats. So what we're doing there for biodiversity, through our operations, we're trying to manage sediment running off from our land and nutrients coming off our farm so that it doesn't overwhelm the watercourses. And the better sediment and nutrient management we have, the better aquatic biology. And we measure that by carrying out aquatic biology surveys. And I haven't yet got our teams trained up in this, but it's a very simple thing for them to be trained up in. And as part of their day-to-day jobs, they can go into the river and take samples and see what we have. And you record the data, and it's quite amazing aquatic biology because it will tell you when there's a problem. Very quickly, you'll see patterns. We've also planted wildflower areas for nectar and pollen, and also for bird food. The bird food essentially provides winter food for birds, and it's anything with seed heads, things like teasel, other grasses, sunflowers, and they can look absolutely wonderful. So that's a food provision in the winter for birds. We also have natural wildflower areas that just occur. And then we've started managing our hedgerows on rotational cuts. So moving away from the neat and tidy, we only cut our hedgerow faces and tops every 2 to 3 years now, because it promotes wildflower growth on them and nuts and berries. Of course, we don't have certain nuts on our sites. And here at Abbotsand Farm, we have otters, we have kingfishers, we have our farmer's crazy about wildlife. He's out at night recording it. We see the bees, and now at this particular farm, we have 22 beehives that we've put in place, which are managed by Becky's Bees for us, which is fantastic. Our UK leaf farms, this is where we grow the salad crops such as spinach and rocket. We have over 200 hectares in Wiltshire and Kent. And again, same sort of planting. We have bird food margins, nectar and pollen areas, which actually increase our beneficial species to deal with pests. We're creating wetlands on these sites. A lot of the areas are not good for production. They're too wet. So we're going to create really good enhanced wetland habitats on them. And we are linking in with wider programs across the landscape as well on these farms. So they're pretty good. This just example here of this turtle dove that links to our Portuguese farms. So we know we have turtle doves in Portugal, and we have been part of a program tracking their migration, and we're pretty sure they've come to our Kent farm. So we think we've got the same birds migrating across from countries to our sites. So this one might be of more interest to some of those smaller businesses that are more urbanized. This is protected growing, which is essentially a glasshouse facility. And as you can see down here, this is pretty built. We have a very limited area where we can do anything for biodiversity because this is all massive glass houses which grow herbs. So what have we done? We've made the most of what we have. Essentially, it's a perimeter for wildlife. We are planting areas and banks and any areas that are available with nectar and pollen, wildflowers for insects. We've actually found some of those insects are really beneficial to crop pests inside the glasshouses as well, which is fantastic. We have a hedgerow boundary, which we're now cutting on rotation to increase flowers and berries. And we do have a ditch system here, which takes roof water at the moment, which has water voles in it. And so we're now actively managing this for water voles. And we've partnered with Chichester District Council for their strategic wildlife corridor project there. This is actually in West Sussex, this site. But we get loads of wildlife on this site. It's fantastic. And this is managed by the estates team. So no farmers involved with this one.
And then please, Leah, if that would be fine.
Okay, quickly on to Vitacress Portugal, just to show you the massive contrast. We farm on sand, 300 hectares on the Atlantic coast, as you can see here, the coastline. And again, they've become a flagship farm site for McDonald's over in Portugal. Totally different habitats, and they're coming into our scheme in 2023. But we do share information on what we're doing. But this is around the main factory facility, this field of poppies. So it's just showing an urban area planted up. And this is my final slide, Wendy. It's just a nice range of pictures to show you of some of the wildlife we have. We have red damselflies. We have a range of orchids on our site that have not been planted. They occur there naturally now. We've created 150 metres of new chalk stream on one of our sites, which essentially carries water from our facility. And then, yeah, like I say, you can see our fields in the background. We have wildflower strips. There's Ben from Arcadian Ecology doing a survey on our reservoir. And these are our teams helping to plant up the new chalk stream that we created. So I shall finish there. And if there's any questions, please do ask.
Thank you so much, Leah, for a fascinating, a very thorough run through and many different examples there of things that we can all implement maybe on a smaller scale within our different workplaces. So I think that covered so many things here, actually. There probably is, before we, I'll just give folks a bit of a chance to write into the chat panel. I just wanted to bring out one of the features coming through from the survey here, and I think if the one that perhaps trouble me the most here would be folks that are still needing to sell that effectively to their top team, and you've spent quite a while there talking about the business case for biodiversity, and I think if we take it here, particularly for businesses that perhaps aren't in the farming and agricultural sector, or perhaps in things like construction and road development where there are obvious links there to biodiversity, or about building that business case. If I could just, if you could perhaps say a bit more about how you would go about building that business case and convincing the top team it was the right thing to do, if perhaps you're in a more traditional service-based industry. Would you have some tips around that for folks?
Yeah, I think if you haven't got the land and that's something where you're going to just maybe plant your roofs or your walls or something like that, it's an investment case. But what we look at on our actual built sites is how that contributes to our carbon footprint as well. So it's to do with our on the business case. On the financial side, we're talking about our non-financial disclosures that we have to make. So we look at how the biodiversity fits in with the carbon footprinting that we do. And you can carbon footprint for biodiversity using farm tools which are available, and there's new systems that are coming on board for biodiversity. But what I've done is actually link ecosystems and biodiversity to the resources that are provided to the business, essentially. So our business, water is a particularly big one, obviously, for us. So it's about ensuring that we protect the water resource through enhancing our ecosystems and biodiversity being an indicator of our water systems and how clean they are. Without clean water, we can't run our business. If we can't put clean water back into the system, we won't be allowed to run our business. So we come in with legislation and compliance. So our legal compliance is a big one for our business case here. Essentially, if you don't look after the biodiversity, you can't run the business. It's as simple as that for us. For a smaller business, I think the business case is perhaps trickier, and it will be guided by regulation eventually.
Yes.
And I think it's a really, really difficult one. I think Carmen might help with this answer as well, because I think say for example, you run a hairdresser's on a high street and you want to put flower tubs outside the front. That's your enhancement for biodiversity, for example. Would you have to make a business case for that? Would it cost you a lot of money, or would you just say, actually, the business case for biodiversity here is it actually makes the shop look really welcoming and friendly? That's one thing I'd say for that.
Okay. We're kind of running into the panel discussion actually in bringing this one out. So I'm actually going to forward the slide on one to that. And I think if we can continue on with what we're discussing here with the business case, maybe I can invite Carmen to come back in. And I can see that you've also posted a link on the chat about studies of measuring increases in productivity due to biodiversity, which I think is all part and parcel of the business case. But don't let me sort of misinterpret that. Carmen, did you want to add some words to what Leah's already given there as the answer on the business case for biodiversity? If you're in a more traditional service-based organisation, perhaps less linked to agriculture or things like road development, things like that.
Yeah, I think following on from what Leah was saying, I think there's definitely a lot of ways you can go to approach this. So yeah, like I said, putting some flowers out the front, it just makes it look nicer, a bit more welcoming. And if you've got a bit more land, if you can have some more green spaces, for example, then it will help the employees as well, like providing somewhere nice for them to go out to sit and have their lunch, where there's flowers to look at, birds to watch. It doesn't have to be anything major if you're really limited on space. So even a green wall, anything that provides a nice attractive feature that's welcoming for visitors, well, nice for staff members to look at, and it still provides biodiversity benefits. So
I'd echo that with Carmen, because sometimes you don't need to make the case for biodiversity necessarily. You're actually making the case for your people.
Yes.
And your clients as to creating an environment that's more natural, more relaxing, and actually the mental health benefits. And I'm sure Carmen's probably put some studies about that on the links, because there are mental health studies out there about greening your environment and your work environment. So I think if I was a much smaller business with absolutely limited space, I don't think I could justify big biodiversity programs, but I could certainly justify improving the workplace for my teams. And I know we're large scale, but just through our program, we've actually set up some walks around our sites now. And believe it or not, our finance teams are the ones that go out. These are the people that sat in front of computers all day long. They're not going out because it's biodiversity. They're going out because it's an amazing place to walk. It's not concrete. It's a nice environment.
Actually, one thing we also do in our business, and we have a sort of what we call walk fit, which has become a bit more biodiversity fit as well. So above obviously the lunch breaks and things like that, the team have it's 15-20 minutes to go and walk away from the lunch hour. And that was really important, obviously, during lockdown, but we keep that going now and encourage them to go. And there's a park just across the way here in Basingstoke. Eastrop Park is just over the bridge from where we are, and it's a wonderful place to go and walk at any time of the year, really. And it's just the benefits of doing that on productivity and our own staff are absolutely there.
Yeah.
So there's simple things you can do really
And
that make use of the what's around you. Really.
That's it. And I think there's a
Definitely.
really key point there, Wendy. If you don't have an area that you can enhance biodiversity on, you could always take part in a scheme that's going on around you. So Carmen talks about Team Wilder. There are communities and groups out there. You could even get involved with your local parks and gardens as a business by allowing staff to go out and take part in some activities. And that could be your biodiversity input, what you're, giving back to biodiversity as well. So that could be your business cases for staff morale, volunteering, and getting involved with the local community as well.
Very good, very good.
Yeah, there's definitely more and more out at the moment. As we mentioned, the wilder communities, there's quite a lot going around Hampshire and the Isle of Wight. If you wanted to get involved, feel free to send me a message. I can pass you on to my colleagues who lead on that. But yeah, there's also lots of local nature conservation volunteer parties. Doing a work party, for example, could be a nice team building exercise as well as getting out with nature. So yeah, there's plenty of opportunities out there these days. So I think more and more we recognise that it is essential to our health and well-being, reducing stress, just generally improving our moods, as well as the greater gain in helping biodiversity.
Very good. I do realise that time's getting a little bit limited now. We are going through the panel discussion. I think just looking at the first one there, the small scale, we've definitely done that one. Let's move then. If we can, I think if we tackle these in the next 5 minutes, that would be great. Okay, talking about supply chain has the biggest impact on biodiversity for us, says the contributed question, a food company. What are your recommendations to ensure better visibility of suppliers' impact? I guess this one is probably best going first to you, Leah. I'm sure you've come against this one.
Yes, it's a tricky one with all environmental things with your supply chain, but with biodiversity, our recommendation, depending on the size of your supplier, if you've got a slightly larger supplier, I think a minimum expect them to be a LEAF Mark certified farmer. And that's a program that ensures that they are farming with the environment in a better way, and it's audited. The other thing is you can go down the route of self-assessment questionnaires where you have a series of questions with your whole supplier program that I'd expect you to have, which has some questions on biodiversity and other environmental areas, such as have they got an environmental management system, or what is your biodiversity program? So you can ask some very simple questions. And depending again on size, if they're supplying produce, they should have a red tractor audit anyway every year, and they should, if they're in Europe, global gap audits. So these are all expected from suppliers for food. So those are 3 examples, but LEAF Mark would certainly be a route I would be pushing my suppliers down.
Yeah, Carmen, I didn't mean to exclude you from that. Was there anything more you wanted to add on that, on the supply chain issue?
No, I think Leah's pretty much covered it. I think she was best placed to answer that question anyway, so I don't think I can add anything else to that.
I shall go to you then for the next one, which is, I think we've heard quite a bit about this, but the best way of going around a biodiversity review, I think there was quite a bit of discussion there about the types of processes that Leah had been through, but I think this one might be for you actually. If you're going to go do a biodiversity review, what do you do? Where do you start, basically?
Okay, so this is something that we do quite a lot at the moment, and it's something that we've done for Vitacress, as Leah's detailed already. We've done it for quite a few of our other corporate members too. So generally you start by looking at what habitats there are currently. We'll do a general walkover of the site to map and record all the habitats present, all the species that are currently present. So largely it'll be botanical species, but we'll also make a note if we see anything else, like any invertebrates, any birds that are there, anything notable. So we'll do a general overview of that, and then from there we've got a good set of baseline data, and we can use that to inform recommendations on what else can be done. So if, for example, if you've got a hedgerow that seems to be struggling, we can provide recommendations on how to improve that, how to make it better for wildlife, changing things like the mowing regime. Just looking at all the different aspects within the habitat area around the business to provide enhancement measures for wildlife. And yeah, something that we've done over a long-term basis, ideally. So year after year, would look at hopefully monitoring that to see whether that habitat management measures that have been implemented are actually being effective, and looking at maybe some target species. So maybe looking at doing butterfly surveys, for example, or doing botanical surveys, and just seeing that over a number of years to see whether, hopefully, that there are increases in numbers of these species, and increase in diversity. And then, yeah, reviewing that on a regular basis as well. It may be that things need tweaking in the management plan. Things are working well, maybe things aren't working so well, and just looking at that and just, yeah, keeping it up to date, really.
Right. Leah, do you have anything more to add to that from your experience of those processes?
Yeah, it's exactly as Carmen's described, but I'd also add to that, with the monitoring side of it, there's one of the challenges I brought up was the monitoring side. Actually, I've got a call this afternoon with a digital tech firm to talk about sensors that you could just put up. We use them in glasshouse growing to detect pests. We can use the same technology to detect other species. So there could be some more simple ways if you don't have that land, or if you haven't got the money for ecological survey. But you won't need a full ecological survey if you haven't got enough land either. Other ways of using technology to see what you've got there as well. And I think I can update on that when I get more information.
Great. I look forward to the next session on biodiversity here then. Thank you very much for that discussion, and thanks to everyone for contributing their questions there. Right, we're on the final slide here. First and foremost, the QR code here is the feedback form. Please, 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 could you fill that in? It really will be much appreciated. This is where you can tell us about your experience today, and as importantly to that is the type of sessions that you'd like to see us do going forwards. If you'd like to give a presentation as well, we'd love to hear from you. So please, please do scan that on your phone. I think Miles is just going to put the manual link in there, and we'll let you leave after you've filled that in, as they say. I'd like to say thank you once again to Carmen and to Leah for their excellent presentations and contributions today. Also to acknowledge the support of the three councils, Basingstoke-and-Deane, Rushmore and Hart, without whom these sessions couldn't take place. Also, we'll keep in touch with all of you by email to let you know what the programme's looking like over the next few months. So you'll be seeing those come your way. So thank you everyone for taking part today, and we look forward to seeing you on the next SBN session. Thank you very much and have a lovely weekend.